What's up, gang? Welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. I'm so pumped to have you here with me. Now listen, the Greatness Machine, we're about two things. Number one, people who are living their passions. And number two, those who are creating greatness in the world and doing both of these things despite the odds against them. Each episode, we're going to feature interviews with game changers, business leaders, telling us their origin stories, what made them tick, what got them to where they are now. Why? So it can help you step into your greatness within your life, your business, and your career. Occasionally, you might hear a few solo episodes from myself, moi, as I say, as I leverage my 20 years of entrepreneurship as a CEO and founder to help you grow and level up in your journey to scale your life and your business. So come be a fly on the wall, enjoy the conversation, and I'm stoked to have you here with me. Guys, welcome to today's episode of The Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest. My man, Sahil Bloom is in the house. What's up, Sahil?
Oh, thanks for having me.
Dude, I didn't even tell you. This show is like kind of R-rated. I drop F-bombs left and right. So you cool with that or no?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm so fucking pumped right now. So we got Sahil here. Guys, you guys know I'm like the most selfish listener of the show and host. And so I was in the cyberspace screwing around, and Sahil was on Rich Roll's show, and I just saw him drop in and start talking about personal growth and wealth, and I'm like, dude, this guy's like this is my jam. I want to talk. I want to meet this guy, and you guys know how I completely weaponized this show to meet cool people. So I had the team reach out. He was so gracious to accept our invite. Pumped to have you here, my friend. Man, how you doing? And Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year. Feeling good. Recharged. A little break from travel to start the year. I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, dude. Do you have any big plans for the year? Anything that you're like super pumped about?
I feel like there's always some big plans. I am one of my intentions for this year. I'm not big on New Year's resolutions. This is sort of a separate aside. I don't like the idea of like setting a specific thing that I'm going to be doing for the entire year. I always thought it was kind of a pipe dream to say that you can plan your entire year perfectly and like know that action is going to make sense in January just as much as in October, November, December. And so I sort of pivoted a few years ago to focusing on what I called New Year's intention. So like the idea of more of like a big picture mindset or focus that's going to kind of guide any variety of actions. And one of those intentions for me this year was this idea of chop wood, carry water. You've probably heard it. It's like this Zen saying of what do you do before enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. What do you do after enlightenment? Chop wood, carry water. It's the idea that sticking and staying true to those boring basics is essential to any greatness that we are trying to achieve in our own life, whatever journey that we're on. And so I really do think of 2026 for me as being about that, like chop wood, carry water. Don't get too far away from those boring basics that got you there in the first place. Because, so much of what we're trying to achieve in life really is found in those simple daily actions.
I love that. There's like a lot of like essentialism in that. I've heard it, but I haven't heard it described in that way. So that was a first for me. What I started doing this 2 years ago, about 6 years ago. I don't know. Tim Ferriss has a thing called the end of year audit, where you go and look at your calendar from the previous year, and you look and like whatever was in your calendar was what you prioritized, right? And I had this moment in 2019 where I built a company to about 1,000 employees, and I was in a hotel in San Francisco. And I myself didn't really I didn't do New Year's resolutions, but my buddy had suggested this, so I did it. And I looked at my calendar from 2018, and I had 2 little kids at the time. So my kids are now 16 and 12. So this is 6 years ago. They would have been 6 and 10.
Wow.
And I was like, I wonder how much I traveled last year. And when I got to 128 days, and I still had 4 more months in the year. And then I end up at 192 days. Now, not all that was business. Some of that was personal. I was like, oh, something's got to change. So that was one thing I started doing was the end of year audit by Tim. And then, but what I started doing 2 years ago, which I thought was pretty cool, is I have these friends here in Austin. They just moved here a couple of years ago, and they do this thing called the One Word Party. So they invite like a bunch of people over, maybe 100 of us, and they have like canvases, and you paint on a little mini canvas like your word for the year, right? And then that's kind of becomes this, not necessarily mantra, but like, what is your theme? So last year in 2025, mine was challenge, and this year it's sovereignty. So I'm focused on emotional and just like personal sovereignty. And that's what I'm focused on. So
What does that mean
that's,
to you?
um,
Sorry, I know I'm turning the
no,
mic on you now, but now
no,
I'm
it's all,
curious.
dude,
What
listen,
does like
man.
personal sovereignty or emotional sovereignty really mean to you?
And my favorite guest is me, by the way. So, like, I love when guests start doing this. Yeah, two things. So, well, like crudely, it's like no one tells me where I'm going to be. I tell me where I'm going to be. Um, and so let's use like I'll use an example. Let's say you have an investor in your business and they're like have leverage on you. Like you don't really have sovereignty within your business. Like they could tell you where you're going to be.
Mhm.
If you are in a relationship that's like sideways, or if you don't have control over like how you show up in the world, do you truly have emotional sovereignty? So it's some of it is very practical from the sense of like how do I structure a deal I want to be in? How do I spend my time? Do I actually own that? All the way to like, am I just having anxiety and not actually owning my emotions and being able to like be with them? And you could have anxiety and have emotional sovereignty in that you are observing that anxiety as opposed to like swimming in it. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So some of it is probably half and half. Some of it is just having emotional sovereignty, owning and being able to like observe my emotions and like deal with them. And but the other part of it is practical sovereignty around like, what am I doing with my life day to day, with my family, with my personal life? Does that how does that register for you?
No, it registers for sure. I was just curious how you would have defined it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I had you know, I'm 47, so I've gotten the pleasure of having my second midlife crisis, and that's what came out of that one. Um, um, hey man, I'd love to. By the way, thanks for the question. I appreciate that. I did a solo on this, so anyone listening, check out the solo from 2 Fridays ago because I talked about the one word. Um, I'd love it if you wouldn't mind, man. I want to dive into your book, the work you're doing. But before we go there, I'd love if I can kind of give your formal bio. And then here at the Greatness Machine, we love origin stories. I'd love to, get some of your origin story. How did you get to where you got? Does that work for you?
Sounds great.
Awesome, you guys. So Sahil is a New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Types of Wealth, a transformative guide to design your dream life. By the way, I did some background before we even invited you on the show, and I'd love for you to really go into like, how did you go from where you're at to becoming a New York Times bestseller? Because the story I think is pretty fascinating that happened around COVID. Managing partner, you're a venture capitalist. You've invested over 40 companies. Top voice in personal growth in modern wealth. Stanford scholar, former NCAA athlete. You play baseball, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
correct? And I, interestingly, I didn't realize you worked with Condoleezza Rice. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that. And obviously, you're a global speaker and storyteller. But most people don't wake up one morning and do all those things. They kind of grit their way there, and through a series of twists and turns, end up where they end up. Would love to hear some of your origin story. How did you get to where you got to?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think um, anyone that talks about origin story is just uh, generally speaking, applying a narrative ex post to something that didn't really make sense along the way. Like we all do this, hindsight bias where everything makes sense, or call it resulting, if you will. Like you go look at the result and then decide whether the decision made sense, yes or no. And so I try to avoid that when I think about my own origin story. I try to like remove some of the survivorship bias, if you will, from that journey and think about like what were the core elements. For me personally, I was very driven by a pretty deep insecurity. From a young age, I grew up in a very academic household. So I have an Indian mother and then I have a Harvard professor father. And so from both sides, I was getting a ton of academic pressure. And it's me and my sister. And my sister is older than me, very high achieving academically, um, very much like a good fit for the way that my family defined success and doing the things that my family defined as like valuable and successful. And so from a young age, for some reason, I started having this little story building in my mind that she was the smart one and I wasn't.
Mm.
And these stories, these narratives that we spin in our minds have the power to create and shape our entire reality. Humans are narrative creatures. The narrative fallacy is the idea that if you tell yourself a story, you will look around and find every single piece of evidence that confirms the story you already believe, the story you're already telling, and you'll ignore everything that would refute it. So you have the seed of that story. And by the way, this is why we have to be so careful about the stories that we allow our children to tell
Mm.
themselves. those stories do shape so much of their life. And for me, that story from a young age that I wasn't very smart meant that I needed to go out and seek this feeling of enoughness in different ways, these pats on the back, these external affirmations to tell me that I was good in something else or that I was good enough. And that drove me in a lot of ways. And frankly, I think we see this across history that like insecurity can be a great driver of success in a traditional sense of the word. You go out and seek out achievements because you're actually trying to cover up this insecurity. And so for me, that was the case. Like my first sort of big pursuit or quest was around baseball. I had decided I wasn't very smart, so I needed a different path if it wasn't the academic one. And sports were that path. I turned out to be uh, decent baseball, talent wise, but extraordinarily driven and
Mm,
resilient and gritty. And that has been the case throughout my whole life. Like I have always had an ability to just go dark on something and be hyper psychotically focused on it. And from about age 16 through 18, I did that with baseball. It got me a scholarship to play at Stanford. So I sort of got in through, whatever side door, back door gets you in with with a sports scholarship. My grades were okay, but not at the level that I could have gotten in academically. And from there, I feel like I just continued to pursue the things that were going to get me those pats on the back. So out of school, I took the job that was going to sound good for the LinkedIn post rather than maybe the job that I necessarily was best suited for. And I sort of just marched forward with this deeply ingrained surety that my fulfillment, my happiness, my contentment was on the other side of some thing, some achievement, some bonus, promotion, title, pay, whatever that thing was. Um, and if I'm being completely honest, that worked right up until the point where it almost led me off a cliff.
mm,
And I think that this happens to a lot of people, whether they realize it or not is a separate question. But for me, I was winning in this one very specific domain of achieving in the traditional sense of the word. I had, the money that I was making, the house, car, like the markers of success from a traditional perspective. But everything else in my life was starting to show cracks and fall apart. I was living 3,000 miles away from my family. I was drinking 6, 7 nights a week, 40 pounds heavier than you see me today, unhealthy body, mind. My wife and I were struggling to conceive at the time, which was really creating strain in our life. And it was all at this time when, really from the outside looking in, you would have said I was winning the game. Yeah, I was
mm.
really doing the things you're supposed to want to do. And I started to have this sensation at the end of 2020, early 2021, that if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game.
Mm.
Um, so when I talk origin story, it was a mix of good and bad. Like I think it was like the wrong driver for a long time, but it led me to a path that looked good from the outside, up until the point where it didn't.
Can I jump in there? First of all, and thank you for sharing that. We talk a lot about what you're describing on the show. I've talked a lot about it. Being on the hedonic treadmill. What does Naval say? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, right? So this idea that we're playing the game that society says is winning is what it looks like to win. What social media, what traditional thought is being quote unquote successful, and then you get the prize, and you, at least in my experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You're like, oh, I don't feel like I won. I feel the same. I might even feel worse because of what it took to get it. And and in my, it sounds to me like you were lucky to realize this pretty early in your life. In my experience, sometimes it takes a lot. Like, was it just like, was it a lesson you had to learn over and over again? Even when you described, by the way, your 16, 18-year-old experience, I did the exact same thing with wrestling when I was in college or in high school, and I wrestled D1 in college and found the backdoor way in through sports, right? But was like, went dark and just all I did was work out 7 hours a day for the sport I cared about because I wanted to win. Um, for you, obviously you had the realization. What was it that you did to kind of change things besides actually changing the game that you played? Was there work around self-worth? Was there work around revaluing what you cared about, combination thereof? Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there were sort of two pieces to it that were parallel path. The big one was the dramatic change. That was sort of mostly an external change, and then there was all of the longer term internal work. So the big external change was um, my wife and I had a very candid conversation about what we wanted our life to look like. You know
Mm,
what our true north really was, and within like a 45-day window, I had sold my house in California. We had left. I had quit my job, and we moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents
nice.
and all of our families. And that was kind of the dramatic change because it was this rapid realignment to align life around the priorities that we really cared about, the things we truly cared about. And that's a really important point. And it really does tie closely to my entire perspective on greatness, which like the name of this podcast really resonates with me. And it ties so closely here because I had this realization that there are two types of priorities in life. There are the priorities we say we have, and there are the priorities our actions show we have. And oftentimes there's a big gap between those two things. I was living that gap. If you had come
Mm,
and asked me what I cared about, what my priorities were in 2020, I would have said all the right things. I would have told you, like, oh, my family, and, I really care about my relationships and my health and all, my wife and all these things. And then you would have watched me for a week, and I wasn't living by a damn one of those.
mm.
And your life only improves alongside your ability to close that gap between what you say and what you do, the say do gap, if you will. I needed a dramatic intervention to close that gap, to do something, to just force it, to like reassume agency over our own lives in a lot of ways. And once we did that, then I could start doing the inner work over a longer period of time to sort of refine like, okay, what is my path? What is the path that I want to create for myself? What does my version of a successful and wealthy life look like now that I've done this kind of rapid response?
So when you first of all, man, kudos for having the courage to do that. I think it's great that you and your wife had that level of intentionality to make that change. And I've done it now a couple times in my life where what I have a good friend. He's actually close to you. He has a great podcast. You should actually go on. His name is Bob Glazer. Um, and he wrote a book he about around core values. And the way he describes it, and I've written actually a book about core values, so we share that in common. He and I, the way he describes it is, you're driving down a tunnel, and your values are the walls of the tunnel, as long as your values are the street that you're driving on, and that you're rubbing up against your values in the wrong way when you start, and that friction gets created when the car kind of hits the side of the wall, right? And that's like that say do gap, right? Like I say I care about, family to your point, but I work 95 hours a week.
Mhm.
Like, no, you care about work, like your priority is achievement. Goes back to the audit Tim Ferriss conversation. Like your calendar says what you care about. I mean, what you prioritize. Maybe you care about both, but you prioritize one over the other. So kudos to you for that, because I think that's a tough call. I think a lot of people have a really tough time doing that. Like when you start thinking, and again, I've done it a couple of times, and dude, when you do it, it's scary, and sometimes it can be super hard. Um, depending on what comes up on the other side or the process. What would be your best piece of advice to someone that maybe is in that say do gap, moment? They're feeling the friction of their values misaligned with their prioritization. Like, what would be your best piece of advice for someone to like make that move, or even if it's the smallest execution step?
I just don't think it has to be this dramatic leap of faith. Like, I think it again goes to the point I made at the outset on the origin story of like everyone, um, sort of glamorizes the leap of faith, like the thing that I did, the big jump, right? But for 99% of cases, it's not going to need to be that. It
Mm,
is as simple as the tiny action. Like you realize you're out of alignment with your priorities, and so the next day you say, "Well, I'm going to do a 15-minute walk today because, my health is one of my priorities and I'm not living by that. So I'm just going to do a 15-minute walk, or I'm just going to do 5 push-ups, or maybe I'm not spending enough time with my family. So I'm just going to put down my phone for 5 minutes with my kids this morning. And what we really fail to understand as humans is the power of time as the exponent in the compounding function. We think
Mm,
about the best things in life are the result of compounding. This idea that, if you do things for long enough, they stack and grow on top of each other. We know that when it comes to money, but it applies to everything in life. But what we forget about it is that time is the exponent. Time is the thing that really matters, not the returns number. So everyone focuses so much on the dramatic thing, the returns, right? You're like, in the investing world, everyone spends all this energy thinking about, how do I get 8% versus 6%, 9% versus 5%, whatever it is. All that really matters is the doing it for 20 years. Like,
mm,
Warren Buffett is not the best investor in history because he had higher returns than everyone in any given year. Actually, I don't know that there was a single year where he was in like the top 5% returns in a given year. He just did it for 60 years. He benefited from time
yep.
being the exponent. And so when you think about life change and trying to shift your life outcomes, that's the way you need to think about it. Is like, what is the thing that I can do sustainably to just slowly start changing, slowly start building that momentum, getting that compounding turned around on my side? Because compounding does go both ways. So if you allow it to atrophy, it will zero you out. But the tiny thing done well tomorrow, like getting started on that tiny thing, that's how you create dramatic life outcomes. You won't change your life in a day, but if you start to change your days, you'll eventually change your life.
Yeah. I love that, man. Um, 2 thoughts. First of all, did you take BJ Fogg's class when you were at Stanford? Because I'm like, this is like full tiny habits right here.
I did not. I did not. I don't know that I crossed paths with him. I actually didn't know the name until after Stanford, so I somehow must have missed it.
Oh yeah, he was a former guest on the show. I love his book. But yeah, when you were talking, I'm like, that's a BJ Fogg thought, right? And I love
Did
that
his
because
book come out before Atomic Habits?
Atomic Habit, yeah, yeah, it did.
Okay.
James was a student of his.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Atomic Habits is Tiny Habits, like better marketed.
Yeah.
You
Just
know,
a much better package on it.
yeah, just a way better marketer, right? Like he
Yeah.
just had a bigger audience, but there, like James has not been on the show, but BJ has, and and I love his stuff because it really, I think, you know, I'll use an example of like it's a great example. Walking 15 minutes, like I want to lose weight. It's like, well, what are you doing about it? Oh, I'm going to cut my calories and work out 5 days a week. And what are you doing right now? Nothing. And I'm like, dude, you're going to quit really quickly. Like I've lost a lot of weight in my life. Like you got to, I mean, you can do it if you're a hardcore badass, like some people, but like most people don't have that, there's a reason why you ended up zeroing out to your point because your habits were that of like doing the opposite. And like, I'm always like, dude, why don't you just like watch what you eat for breakfast? Like just like have a protein shake and then eat shitty the rest of the day. Like
Seriously.
because I think it comes down. One of the things I've figured out around this is what is the smallest thing I can do to create momentum? Just like the smallest, where I can't not do it. Like BJ talks about like flossing one tooth.
Mm.
Like hey, like you don't need to floss twice a day for 20 minutes. Like floss one tooth. Take a bite of it, put an apple at the end of your desk. I didn't even say eat it, right? Just put it at the end of your desk. So, that's I love that, man. I think that's pretty. It's great advice. When you start, so you guys made the move cross country. I'd love if you could tell a story of like, by the way, what were you doing before? Like, what job did you quit? I'd love to know that.
I was working at a private equity fund. So
Oh,
I had joined a private equity fund straight out of school as part of the first group of analysts, had risen my way up, and was, on the track, if you will. The funds were doing great. It's a great group of people. Um, really enjoyed it and the learning curve of it for the first 3 or so years of the 7 that I was there. And then I would say it was just a fundamental mismatch for my energy and my kind of things that I was interested in.
yeah.
But had convinced myself again that like just, one more bonus, one more promotion, one more whatever, and I was going to feel different.
Just one more deal, man. Just one
Yeah.
more weekend to build decks and analyze numbers
Yeah.
and get another deal in the pipeline. I just like I built a private equity fund that I just left a few months ago. So they're actually our investors based in Boston, Charles Bank.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Charles Bank was our investor, so you might know those guys. Um, yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, private equity is a grind, man. It's hard, and there's a lot of really motivated people that don't mind that path because the path can pay a lot of quote unquote dividends, with money.
Yeah, I
And
think it's hard to do. There's this interview from like maybe 2015 that um, a reporter did with Novak Djokovic, tennis player, and asked him about how he had achieved this like extraordinary longevity in the sport. And his answer was that he can continue playing at the level he is because he likes hitting the tennis ball.
mm,
And the reporter was like, well, doesn't everyone like hitting the tennis ball? And he was like, no, you'd be surprised. There are a lot of people, like I can tell their motivations are different. I don't judge them, but their motivations are different. And I remember that hitting me like a ton of bricks. Just that idea that you are never going to be able to compete with a person who just likes hitting the ball if you don't. And, look, I've been really fortunate to spend time around some extraordinary people. Tim Cook, the CEO at Apple, has been an amazing mentor and friend to me. And I remember having breakfast with him like shortly after reading that article and asking him about some of his kind of daily routines. And he was walking me through his day. And it was this like insane day of stuff and filled and meetings and work and working out, like all of this stuff. And I think like that day would have made most people's head fall off, just spin. And I noticed that he had this like little twinge of a smile in his eyes and on his face as he talked about it. And I just remember thinking in my head, like, good luck competing with this guy. Yeah, like if you are going up against someone who just likes hitting the ball, it is going to be very hard if you don't. And it really reframed how I was thinking about my own path because I looked around me in the office and even at other firms and just realized that there were a lot of people who really like hitting the ball when it comes to the deal process and investing, and just they were like junkies for that stuff. They like geeked out over models and yield curves and refinancings, all this stuff that I just didn't care about. And so I remember thinking in that window, like, I need to find where I like hitting the ball because
mm.
fun is a long-term competitive advantage. Like fun is a moat in a real traditional sense. And if you can find that thing, it's going to be the same thing I said about Tim, but about you. Like, good luck competing with you if you can find that thing.
Yeah, that's great. I love that analogy of like hitting the ball because I have a twin brother, and so he worked. He's at the private equity company that I started, and his job is to source deals. And I, if you asked him what he does, 99.99999% of people would be like, "That sounds like the biggest fucking grind." And for him, the game, it's such a game, and he doesn't mind. He'll just go out there and his goal is to get you on the phone to talk about doing a deal. And the more he does, the happier he gets, and he doesn't mind doing the grind for it. And he outproduces everyone by 15x. So I love that. What do you think? Like, if you were to think about like, how does one figure out what hitting the ball is for them? Because I think like in concept it makes sense, but in practice, I'm curious how you think about figuring that out.
I think you have to explore enough to find it. Like we as a culture and as a society have created this um, set of sort of arbitrary timelines where you're supposed to be uh, at certain checkpoints at certain
Mhm.
things along the way. If you're going to be on track, if you're going to be successful.
Sure.
So like I remember that feeling of just being so afraid of being behind. I was like, well, I have to take the good job out of school and I have to make sure I get promoted by the end of 2 years. And then I have to get promoted again. Then I have to win Forbes 30 under 30. Because if I don't do that, like my classmates are winning that, that's going to be, I'm just falling off track. I'm falling behind. I'm not achieving. And my birthday during my 20s was like something that created anxiety for that reason because there were all these arbitrary timelines. And what those arbitrary timelines do is that they force you onto a single path because you're so afraid that if you step off the path or if you walk back down the mountain, you're going to be way behind. And I can't possibly do that. So what happens to most people is they start climbing up one mountain, the mountain that they chose out of college based on their major, by the way, which they chose when they were like maybe 18 or 19 years old. And you get, a little way up the mountain, you realize I don't like hitting this ball, but you're so afraid of walking back down to find the right one that you just keep slowly trudging your way up. And it's like chewing glass, and you wake up and you're 60 years old and you wonder what the hell you just did with your life. It takes a lot of courage to spurn that whole set of false timelines and to say, like, you know what? I'm 25, 26, 27 years old. Heck, I'm 40 years old, and I'm going to completely reinvent my life. You can reinvent your life as many times as you want to create your life, to create the life that you actually want. You can go and do that. You don't need to consent to these arbitrary timelines that exist out in the world. My entire life changed when I realized that. It didn't matter
Mm,
that I was 30 years old and that I was like junior partner at a private equity fund. I could just step off that track and do something completely different that made no sense right on the internet. Right? Like I could do that. And I'm the son of, an Indian mother who everything is about the name brand and about the,
mm,
go to McKinsey, go to Goldman Sachs, like do the thing that you're supposed to want to do. If I can go step off that track and go do something different, I know that anyone can. And so I
yeah.
just think that we need to celebrate a little bit more exploration in the way that you pursue your own path in your own life. You can try different things, and it doesn't have to be in full time. You can try them on the weekends, you can try them in the evenings. You can identify things that create that energy for you, where you do find that you are just enjoying hitting the ball.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like I really appreciate you saying that. I'm 47, right? So, and I would say on paper, you said this earlier, like anyone's going to look at your life earlier and be like, dude, this guy's crushing it. And I think same for me. Like you look at my paper and in there's moments where I was hating what I was doing, and I did what you said. I turned around and walked down the mountain at moments where you would be like, seriously, dude, no
Hmm.
way. And I'm like, yes way. And I think that, like, to your point, it doesn't need to be as dramatic. As you were saying that, I thought of a guy that I went to high school with. For whatever reason, he posted something on Facebook recently where he was like celebrating the fact, this is super nichey and funny what I'm about to say. He was celebrating the fact that his business had sold 100,000 boxes of Japanese Pokemon cards this year. And I was like, "What?" It was just like a cool dude, like guy I went to junior high and high school with. And I was like, I thought he was in like the mortgage business. And I go look at his LinkedIn profile, and he did. And I was in the mortgage business, so I knew, that's why I was aware of that. He had worked at Bank of America, and he got his MBA at UC Irvine, and he followed this path, to your point. And then he was this product guy for this large publicly traded mortgage company. And it looked like around 2023 he left the mortgage company, he didn't even put this in his LinkedIn profile that he's the CEO of a Japanese Pokemon company, right? Like they sell Japanese Pokemon cards, which is so weird and nichey, right? Yet here he is running now a $7 million business that does, obviously something he cares about and loves, because there's no reason to go get into that. There's plenty of other things to get into. And I just thought to myself, as you said, I'm like, he totally found this little thing that's like weird and that he loves, right? And he's doing really well with it now. And so I think that the word that like, you don't know this, but I clip whenever someone's just dropping knowledge. I start market clipping on the app. I was market clipping like crazy, like for the last 10 minutes. I'm like, this is these are gems, because the word that you said, that I think that, like, I come from from an Italian immigrant family and a Persian dad, where if you're either a lawyer or a doctor, you're a loser, right? And he was an entrepreneur. He didn't even do it himself. He just like that was just the script, right? And so like there is no like exploration. What are you talking about? I told my parents when I was a freshman in college, I was going to UC Davis. I was like, hey, I want to be a Japanese and dramatic major, double major. It's funny, right? My parents laughed and they're like, "Not if we're going to pay for you to go to college." And they laughed, and I got a degree in business economics and accounting, where I love that stuff. And so I think that, not that I should have done that, but I was 18, I didn't know. But I think like when the word you used that just like was like I should have been a fireworks in the air was exploration. And so I think celebrating exploration with some intentionality around it and some fun, I think that does create these opportunities. Because I actually believe right now, I have a good friend, Ryan Levesque, who talks about category of one, and we're walking into a world right now where, like, AI is going to commoditize a lot of the generalized behavior and work that we do and execution that we do. Automation is going to do that as well. But these nichey things that you really can just geek out on, hit that ball like crazy, is where you're going to create a lot of value. What are your thoughts when I say that?
I think it's absolutely right. I mean, I think that we have created and shaped an entire world around the traditional way that employment worked and the traditional way that skills and the deployment of those skills worked. And what you're seeing is a very rapid structural destabilization and destruction of that old model of
Mhm.
thinking about work and how value is created. And I think in many ways the world will belong to those people who are courageous enough and can tolerate enough uncertainty to create their own new model, to lean into this weird combination of hobbies and interests and eccentricities and energies that allow them to create value for people in a unique way that no one can really predict today. Um, and I think that that is both exciting and terrifying, depending on how much agency you have as an individual. I think for the high agency person who is willing to lean in and who is willing to tolerate uncertainty, that is going to be the most exciting time in history that they could be alive. For the low agency individual, it's going to be terrifying and probably highly disruptive. But fortunately, agency can be learned and it's a muscle that can be flexed, and no one is going to be left behind unless they are unwilling to adapt and change.
Yeah. So you took the leap, you moved home, and you got into the content creation business essentially, putting content out on the internet, thought leadership out on the internet that turned into a book. Like walk us through, like, what was that, just you leaning into your interests, exploring, and then, I mean, obviously you got a lot of momentum fairly quickly. Like, I'd love to hear a little bit of that story and how that led to the book and who you're spending time with nowadays.
Yeah, I always loved writing. um, I had started writing on the internet right when COVID started. So May of 2020, I like popped open Twitter and wrote my first uh, what now would be called a thread. At the time, it was just I wrote a tweet and then commented under it with another tweet because I wanted to write something longer than what Twitter allowed. And At the time, I had 500 followers. Had never done anything publicly in that way, and by the end of that year, I was working full time. I was just doing this on the weekends. I had grown this Twitter platform to about 100,000 followers. And when I ended up ultimately quitting my job and kind of deciding I was going to go all in on these things, that was May of 2021, just a few months later. And the path there was fairly unstable in certain ways. Like I didn't quit my job to make money doing content creation. I actually, as I had built this Twitter platform, I had done a lot of investing personally and through the networks that I had from Stanford and then also through my job. And a lot of the founders of these startups and companies I'd backed were coming to me and saying, like, hey, you've grown this platform on Twitter. We see that could be really valuable for our company and for myself as a founder. Can you help us do that? And so I had started this little like consulting thing up that was paying my bills in a lot of ways when I quit my job, and was like very quickly making more money than I was making in my private equity days with this little advisory business, if you will. And so what it allowed me to do, in hindsight, again, looking at it now, at the time I didn't think about this, but at the time, I didn't know anything. So looking back on it now, what that allowed me to do was play the ultimate long game when it came to the content. So I never chased brand deals or like short-term dopamine hits. I got to really say, like, what is the ultimate goal of putting out these ideas into the world? Well, I want to build trust. I want to build trust at scale. Trust is being rapidly decentralized globally. You think about back 50 years, trust was consolidated, centralized in the hands of a few companies who owned all of the ad space and airwaves. It was like P&G, Johnson and Johnson, those type of companies. They built layers of commerce on top of the trust that they owned. Well, now, if you follow the arrow of progress forward, what I observed was that trust is being rapidly decentralized into these little nodes, these little pockets, individuals. So if I can become one of those nodes where I build long term trust, there's all sorts of commerce that can be created around that. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's products, maybe it's companies, maybe it's an investment fund, whatever it might be. I don't know, but I know that the trust is at the core of that and that that's the
Mm.
real asset to be cultivated. So having this like income coming in that gave me a little bit of a safety net from this advisory consulting business, which wasn't really something I wanted to do long term, gave me the freedom to pursue building the actual asset, which was the trust. And that has been what my whole path has sort of manifested as over the last 4 or 5 years. It has just been, I'm going to show up every single day and try to put things into the world that create value for people for free. And that is going to hopefully create connection and trust with a lot of people. And over time, I will build layers of commerce on top of that. I have not done any of the traditional things when it comes to being a creator. I don't, do like brand deals in the traditional sense. I don't sell a course. I don't have a mastermind. I don't do that stuff. I have sort of built my business ecosystem in very different ways. But that was really the sort of unlock for me, was recognizing that trust was the atomic variable that I needed to focus on.
Yeah, dude, you're speaking my language right now, and I think that, yeah, there's so much there. Going back to going from 500 followers to 100,000 followers in a year, and you're just putting your thoughts out on Twitter. Was there any strategy with that, or were you just like, just gonna put some thoughts out there and it just got picked up? I'd love to hear how you thought about that.
I wish I could say there was a strategy. The reality of it was I was just writing things that I thought other people would find valuable. And the way that I was determining that I thought people would find it valuable was I was like asking friends what they would like to learn about. So I was writing these like sort of finance and market explainer pieces, basically. And I was trying to simplify things so that anyone could understand them. My perception at the time was that you basically had these two paths within the world of like business and finance content. You had people that were talking over your head, trying to make you feel dumb, using all sorts of acronyms, jargon, etc. And then you had people telling you to YOLO into GameStop call options, like really dumbing it down. And there was nothing that was like the Toyota Camry in the middle, right? Just like getting you from point A to point B and giving you what you need. And so I was like, I'm going to be the Camry. I'm just going to like do that. It's not going to be sexy, but I'm going to simplify and break things down in that way. And turns out there was a lot of people that were interested in that and looking for that kind of thing. And so I carved out, a real following by doing that. And over time, I just sort of expanded the purview of what I had the credibility and the right to talk about. Like credibility is created at this point. There's no like credentials anymore in the world that we live in. We're in this permissionless world. You can, people ask like, well, what gives you the credibility to write a book? I'm like, well, because millions of people turn to me for ideas that they've gotten value from in their life. Like that was created. I didn't need, there's no PhD in life advice. Like you don't need a
Sure.
PhD from Yale in life advice in order to be smart on that. Frankly, there's a bajillion people who probably have PhDs in like parental psychology that are bad parents or like
Yeah, yeah.
like whatever. It doesn't make you good at the thing. Like there's all these life coaches out there that don't have their own life in order. And so my perspective is like, well, we should take advice from the people that are actually doing the thing that we want to do, right? Like if I go to the gym and someone gives me advice on how to like grow my shoulders, and they're like scrawny and don't have any shoulders, I don't really want to take that person's advice. No offense. Like they might be super knowledgeable, but I'm much more likely to take advice from the person who looks the way that I want to look, like is doing the thing that I want to do. That's just reality. That is earned credibility. And so, I really just grounded myself in that. I just started sharing, I started writing, and I was in the arena. Like I just wasn't afraid to get booed, and I wasn't afraid of failure, and I wasn't afraid of the miss. I just kept doing things, kept putting things out there.
Yeah, showing up, right? The compounding return. I love that. When you obviously written the book. It's so funny, man. I'm like, I have a list of questions I didn't even touch, by the way. Which is super typical of me and my shows. I meant to ask you a lot of questions about the book. Let's talk about it just because I think we're getting to the point where I want to get you out of here on time. You wrote the book, The 5 Types of Wealth. Obviously, I have a friend, David Osborne, that has written a book that kind of explores this idea as well, that there's different types of wealth, not just financial wealth.
What's his book called? I don't think I've seen it.
Oh, it is. Dude, I'm blanking on it right now. Money. Let's see, David. Let me pull it up. Osborne book. I'll pull it up while you
Yeah, no worries. Wealth
explain
Can't Wait.
Wealth Can't Wait. That's right.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
I think
great.
it's the 7 Gardens of Wealth. And
Cool.
he's a buddy of mine. But I thought it but I have a lot of friends who are like, I'm a time wealth billionaire. Like that's they're like, they'll brag to me how much they didn't work last year. That's like, and that is and in their circles they're in, they're like, yeah, whatever. I don't give a shit how much money you make. Tell me how much you didn't work. That's what I want to know. How much time, how many weeks of travel did you do with your family? Like, how many date nights did you have? Like, I'm surrounded by a lot of people that think that way. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your book. Like what's it about? Love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the entire premise of the book is that we need to create a new scoreboard for how we think about measuring our own success, our own wealth in life. And importantly, that the scoreboard needs to be individual. You will never feel wealthy, you will never feel successful unless you create your own definition of those things. If not, you will just be chasing whatever definition the world has handed you and told you should care about. And that may or may not align with the priorities and values and principles that you actually hold close. And so, what I wanted to frame up was this new way of thinking about wealth beyond just money, to say wealth is about a lot more than your net worth. It is about these other areas of life. And the 5 types that I lay out are time wealth, which is about freedom, time, social wealth, which is about relationships, mental wealth, which is about purpose, physical wealth, which is about health and vitality, and then financial wealth, which is about money, but with the specific nuance of really thinking about expectations as your single greatest financial liability. Really getting a handle on what it means to you to have enough, what your enough life looks like, if you will.
So when you start, as you kind of dissect those different areas, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, everyone has their own personalized dashboard. The like equal sign is enough equals, right? And you know the kind of Buddhist philosophy with that is like, if you want nothing, you're the wealthiest person on earth, right? Is that kind of the premise here? Is you're this like, hey, if I want less, or I'm prioritizing my wants and really getting clear on what they are, then I can actually almost like design and reverse the life that it's going to take for that to get created. Is that how you think about it?
I would say it's a little more nuanced than that. I am actually not asking people to temper their ambitions in any way. I just want them to be your ambitions, not ones that you've blindly accepted by default. What I say in the book is like, reject the default path, live by design. There is so much of the way that we have thought about our pursuits that is fundamentally built out around this default definition of what success looks like that no one has actually opted into or consented to. We've just blindly taken it as our own. And so the biggest picture question that I really want people to step back and ask is, what do you actually want your life to look like? Like I think it was Naval that said that the true test of intelligence is whether you get what you want out of life. I think there's a layer deeper than that, which is knowing what you actually want out of life. That is the first step in all of this. What do you want your life to look like? Like if you were to wake up in 5 years and be totally in flow, everything is clicking, life just feels good, energized. What are you doing from the time you wake up in the morning until the time you go to bed at night? Where are you? Who are you with? What are you spending time on? What are you thinking about? What are you working on? If you can understand that, now I can reverse engineer into the changes that I need to make, the steps that I need to take in order to go and shape and create that life.
So when you think of your own life, and I think that was put beautifully, and you're to push out 5 years from now, what does that look like for you, Sahil?
I mean, my definition of a wealthy life is being able to take my son in the pool at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday. That means pretty much everything to me about what wealth is. It means that I have enough money to afford a pool. It means that I have the time freedom to decide that I'm going to go outside at 1 p.m. on a Tuesday and get in. It means that I have a relationships with my wife, with my son, that they want me there. And it means I'm healthy enough to go and do that. And so for me, that has been a really clarifying thing because I have already achieved that. I have that version of a wealthy life. And so as I think about making decisions now, I need to view it with that lens in mind that I'm not just going to chase things for the sake of chasing them if they're pulling me away from that life. If they are helping amplify that in some way, they're making me feel more purpose, or they're making me feel healthier, they're making me feel more abundant in some way, then that could be great. But I'm not going to go chase something just for the sake of money if it means me being away for 200 days out of the year or being a slave to someone else's calendar. Right? Like, Elon Musk could come offer me $100 million to be his chief of staff and work 100-hour weeks. I would say no. And I'm
Hmm.
not just saying that. Like, I literally would say no because I would not be able to do anything. I would not be in control of my time in any way anymore. So why would I take that money if I already have my version of what a successful life looks like?
Yeah, I wouldn't take that job either. It's funny.
It sounds like
People,
my nightmare. It's a great job for
yeah,
somebody. Maybe when I was 20, in a different season of life, it could have been incredible, but not now.
yeah. It
Now
depends
I
on how
have
much.
a 3.5-year-old kid that likes hanging out with me a little too much.
I might do it for a year if it was 100 million in a year. I mean, that could, I'd consider that 1 year. Um, no, but yeah, man, like life's short, and that's. I don't think people know. I think either A, people are used to doing that, or B, they don't know. What I found is people like to be distracted, or at least they're used to being distracted with work, and they're used to being distracted with priorities that if I told them that they had 6 months to live, that would be the last thing that they would want to do with their time. And I think that the minute I didn't realize that I was as addicted to a distraction until I didn't have it, and then I was like, how do you feel about that? Because for me, it was like leaving a thing, it happened right before COVID. COVID happened. I'm locked in my house with nothing to do, and I was like looking for ways to be distracted. And that was the first time in my life where I was like, wow, I am addicted to distraction. I need to be distracted because when I'm alone with my feelings and my thoughts and I have empty space, I don't want to go do these other things that I think are important for me.
I think that is probably the default for most people. I mean, I think we live in a world that really fears distraction. I personally, I think AI makes all of that worse. Like, it's just easier and easier to avoid um, the solitude and the silence that used to mark a lot of life. I try to structure more of that into my life so that I cannot lose the muscle, if you will. I just think so many of our greatest thoughts and most creative outcomes come from embracing that solitude, embracing that struggle, that cognitive friction, if you will. So I think it's important to try to preserve in your life.
Yeah. And going, I know we're at the end here. That's a full like Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett. I work. I need 4 hours of quiet a day to do my best thinking. And look at the value they create. So, man, look, I want to honor your time. First of all, this is incredible having you here. I love our conversation. If anyone wants to learn more about your work, connect with you, get the book. Where can they learn more about all things Sahil?
Well, you can get the book, The Five Types of Wealth, on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. It looks like this. And you can find me at Sahil Bloom on any of the major platforms. And I write a newsletter that goes out a few times a week for free. It goes out to about close to 1 million people now. You can find that at sahilbloom.com.
Awesome. Sahil, you ready for the greatness question? We'll get you out of here.
Sure.
All right. What is the number one barrier to creating greatness that you've overcome in your life, and how did you overcome it?
The number one barrier to overcoming greatness in my life, not knowing what greatness meant to me. I'm going to go to the most root elemental level here. The barrier was just not understanding what it looked like to me to be great. And once I sat down and spent time and sat with that enough to understand what greatness really meant and looked like to me, not to the world, then I was able to go and take actions to achieve that.
Love it. Sahil, man, so much gratitude having you here with us today. I loved our conversation. Really love where you're going, the thought leadership, and looking forward to more.
Thank you.
You guys, as leaders, we're givers. Make sure you share this out to your platforms and networks. Check out Sahil, his work, his book, his newsletter. Until next time, from here at the Greatness Machine, peace out, everybody. We love you.
You are listening to The Greatness Machine, and that's a wrap for today. Listen, if you love what you heard, subscribe to the show on whatever podcast platform that you're tuning in on so that you don't miss any of our future episodes. We have tons of great people coming on, and we're stoked to have you here to enjoy it with us. Leave us a review. Tell us what you love most about this particular episode. We love getting the reviews. We love to see what you guys love most. And if this particular episode, made you think of someone who's leveling up in their business and in their life, print screen, share it with them. Leaders are the best givers. And after all, we're all here to support and grow with each other. And in case you want to see some of the fun behind the scenes shots or some of the things that we're doing, I'm actually writing about this in my weekly newsletter. Go to www.therealdarius.com and subscribe to my newsletter. We're talking about fun things like business and life and mindfulness and cryptocurrencies and gosh, I don't even know, everything and anything, but it's tons of fun stuff I write about. I try to get it out on a weekly basis. You can subscribe at www.therealdarius.com. And with that said, look, thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. I love you. Peace. We're out of here. See you guys on the next one.
She's my lover.